Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I have to speak in English to you, but believe me, you are better with that than me talking Icelandic. So, yes, thank you. So, I will give you a bit of an overview what is in the pipeline in Brussels, although I don't know what the people before me have told you already. I think I can skip, I have the feeling I can skip some slides and be quicker. So CEWEP is the umbrella association representing the operators of waste-to-energy plants across Europe, Brussels-based, with an office in Düsseldorf as well. And the CEWEP members annually treat more than 80 million tons of municipal and similar commercial and industrial waste, which cannot be recycled. And we represent 410 plants in Europe. This is a map of Europe which we update every year, and you see in black or dark blue, let's go to Belgium. So there are 17 waste-to-energy plants in Belgium, and they annually treat 3.4 million tons of waste. So this is a map that we update every year, and you see in the north, sorry, Iceland is not there yet, but maybe in the future. So it's more densely in the north of Europe, where there are waste-to-energy plants. There is, for example, none planned in Greece, none in Malta, and also in the eastern part of Europe there is not much waste-to-energy. Unfortunately, these states still landfill a lot. The development of waste-to-energy in Europe was the following. We follow it since 2001. This is the amount of waste-to-energy plants until 2017. They are now within EU 28 plus Switzerland and Norway. They are 492 plants, treating an amount of 96 million tons. Again, municipal and similar commercial and industrial waste. From the 90 million tons of residual waste that is yearly treated in the EU, you could produce energy, and that would be sufficient energy to supply 18 million people with electricity or 15 million people with heat. And this helps also to save fossil fuels, gas, lignite, depending what your energy mix is. So either electricity is fed into the grid to supply end users, or you have hot water, which is delivered to the district heating. In some cities it's cooling, like Vienna, for example. They cool a hospital as well, so they can be very energy efficient because they deliver heating and cooling. And often there is steam that can be used in nearby industry. Sometimes you can have, for example, chemical industry or energy-intensive industries. You build a pipe from the waste-to-energy plant to the industrial side, and this is how they can reduce their carbon footprint and get affordable energy from the waste-to-energy plant. What is the leftover from the combustion process? That's the bottom ash, and the bottom ash contains about 10% metals, and that can be recycled as well. Aluminium, steel, and so on. And with that you can also save CO2. In Europe, we produce about 20 million tons of bottom ash from waste-to-energy plants, and with that you can save about 3 million tons of CO2 by recycling the metals from the bottom ash. When you take out the metals, then there is a mineral part which is left, and from the mineral part of the bottom ash you can use them for aggregates used in construction works, for example. This, for example, is a brick from Rotterdam, and this is how they use the mineral part of the bottom ash. And recycling the metals from the bottom ash counts, this is explicitly mentioned in the new Waste Framework Directive, it counts towards the recycling targets of 65% of municipal waste, which was mentioned already, I guess. And also it counts also towards the packaging targets. There are now, the Commission has made some calculation methods how to monitor recycling according to the new rules, and there it's also mentioned how to calculate recycling from metals from bottom ash to count towards the targets with quality criteria. So the circular economy has its goals. So the goal is to prevent waste, of course, to share, to donate, to repair, and in the first place, of course, to make products better so that they can be better recyclable. Eco-design is quite high on the agenda in Brussels. So the targets, I think that has been mentioned, right? The landfill target, not to landfill more than 10% municipal waste by 2035. And member states who are lagging behind, who landfill more than 60% in the year 2013, which is the base year, they are allowed to have 5 years longer, so by 2040, which is a very long transition time. However, the signal is clear. Maximum 10% landfilling will be allowed in the future for municipal waste. Then recycling targets, so that is 65% by 2035 for municipal waste. And again, member states lagging behind have 5 years longer. I will show you later on some Eurostat-based figures how the EU member states achieve these targets. But I must say this 65% recycling with the new strict recycling rules, how you calculate it. And if you calculate as recycling only what is actually recycled, none of the member states achieves the 65% yet. Although Germany, my home country, claims they achieve more, it's not true. That's not according to the new strict calculation methods. So at the moment, I think nobody achieves it yet. Packaging waste targets, there are as well. There are some upcoming measures, but I will skip these slides. It's just later on, if you want to see it, you can have it. And that's the reality. I presented you the goals, and the reality is unfortunately still a little bit different. We see news that Commission puts Poland and Slovakia on notice over subpar landfills. Also, Italy is breaching landfill rules, and Poland vows to fight illegal waste dumps. So that's the reality in Europe. And particularly since China restricted its the waste imports, we observe more of these things in Poland. Particularly, there were in the summer, springtime 2018, just after the Chinese policy changed, there were more than 20 fires just in 2 months noticed, open fires on dump sites. So this is just one example of what happens if we are not, well, what is unfortunately reality and what needs to be changed and tackled. So what is also reality is we still landfill in the EU 28, that's a reference, almost 58 million tons of municipal waste. And with this you can fill each week the Wembley Stadium, just with the waste that we still landfill in EU 28. And municipal waste is only part of the total waste volume. It's less than 10%. So we landfill quite a lot, still a lot. And there was the World Bank report issued 2018. And there they give figures what is worldwide going to landfills. And that's really scary. It is with the worldwide waste, you could fill 5 times the Wembley Stadium every day with the waste that is still worldwide landfilled, or even sometimes not landfilled but dumped. Sometimes there's no sanitary landfill at all, it's just dumped. So I think these are scary figures and we need to change something on that. To go to the rather positive side back. So the tendency was not too bad in Europe. So the red line is landfilling, which went down from the year 2001 to 2017 by 32 percentage points. At the same time, recycling went up 19 percentage points. And also waste to energy grew 12 percentage points. More or less in parallel with recycling, but less significantly as recycling. So I think that's a positive sign. The tendency is quite good. And I think from the tendency you also see that recycling and waste to energy together helped to reduce landfilling. So that's the tendency to turn the thing to a little bit of positive, to the positive side. And this happened due to some EU legislation. The one was the Waste Framework Directive from 2008. It gave some incentives to divert waste from landfills and to recycle more. and also to be more energy efficient with waste to energy plants. There was the R1 formula introduced with energy efficiency criteria, and that gave incentives to the operators of waste to energy plants to make the plants more efficient. That was an incentive. Then, of course, the former Waste Incineration Directive, now Industrial Emissions Directive, and based on this, the best available technology, BREF, waste incineration, which implemented very, very strict rules for waste to energy, which is hard for the sector, but good for the environment and should be good for the acceptance. And this sector is very, very strictly controlled. One of the most important legislation was the landfill directive, I think. That really, really helped to make the red line going down to divert waste from landfills. So the landfill directive was essential, and also the new one will be an important tool to go away from landfilling. Then there's also the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive. The biodegradable part of the waste is renewable energy. So about half of the energy that is produced by waste to energy plants is considered renewable energy. And this also helps to maximize the energy embedded in the waste and to use that from the waste that is not feasible and not suitable for sustainable recycling. So this is the map that or the graph that we update every year based on Eurostat figures. Now we have the 2017 figures. So you see principally the EU average is 46% recycling, including composting, 29% waste to energy, landfilling an average 23%. You see on the left side those member states who achieve high recycling rates. They almost phased out landfilling, and they also have a considerable amount of waste to energy, proving that waste to energy helps, again, together with recycling, to reduce landfilling. The member states who are here, they have achieved to reduce landfilling dramatically by either introducing landfill bans or introducing very high taxes for landfilling. Whereas on the right side, you have here some member states with a lot of red, that's the landfill percentage, and they also have then a low recycling rate and also none or very low waste to energy. And yeah, Iceland is here, but you have seen the figures already, I guess, or you know these figures from Iceland. I guess that's based on Eurostat. If it's 100% correct, I don't know. It's based on Eurostat. And you see some gray here. The gray is unfortunately where it doesn't mix up. Not always the waste that is generated and treated, the figures don't always sum up to 100%. So we decided this year for the first time to make this gray zone just to communicate that there's a gap of data. So Eurostat is very happy. Recently they launched a press release. Never ever we had high recycling rates as now. For municipal waste, for example, 46%. So that's quite positive if you see the tendency. However, what is really used? How much recycles do you use to replace virgin materials? And this is at the moment only 12%. So 12% of the material resources used come from recycled products and recovered materials. So that's comparatively a low figure. So I think there's still some work to be done so that the market trusts and accepts the recycled products. And I think one important point for that is quality, because if you are sure that the recycled products have a certain quality, then the market will accept it. And I think that's one of the main reasons why so far it's only 12%. So we have to improve the quality of recycling, starting with source separation and so on. And the quality of recycling will or should be tackled by a new thing which is in the pipeline in Brussels. That's the interface between chemical, waste and product legislation. And there you have to make the balance between quality and quantity, because we have so far in EU legislation a lot of quantity targets. Quality is a little bit more tricky to tackle. And so there are questions the Commission asks stakeholders, what should we do? Should the same rules apply for products as for secondary raw materials, or can recycled products be treated in a little bit more generous way in order to boost recycling? These are sometimes very difficult aspects you have to balance out. And also often it's not known. Waste is something heterogeneous, particularly municipal waste. So sometimes you just don't know which is in it, which compounds are in it. Whereas in chemical legislation, you mostly know the composition. So these are tricky things, and you have to also consider the availability. You know, if you have a glass made by lead, if you drink from the glass, nothing happens, although lead can be dangerous. So it depends in which form, in which composition you are facing the waste. So these are quite tricky things, and the Commission is currently dealing with it. However, they said with new proposals, they will wait until the new Commission will be installed. That's in autumn this year. So we have to wait a bit for that. When it comes to quality recycling and having a clean circular economy, I think waste to energy can help with that. Because if the waste is too mixed, too polluted for recycling, then waste to energy come into play and helps that these polluted wastes are not spread into the environment. And for this, waste to energy is equipped with a quite sophisticated flue gas cleaning system. So if this is a waste to energy plant, waste delivery, thermal treatment and energy generation, and this is the flue gas cleaning system, which is a very huge part of the whole waste to energy plant. And also when it comes to investment, it can be up to 40–50% of the total investment. However, this flue gas cleaning system guarantees that the emissions are very, very low. So I come back to the circular economy and the targets. We were thinking, because some people think once we have a circular economy, 2035, there won't be any residual waste anymore. So we don't have to be careful and concerned about residual waste treatment capacity. So we did a very simple calculation. You take the amount of municipal waste, 246 million tons. And there's also commercial and industrial waste. That's about 294 million tons in EU 28. That's the base year. Then you do collection, source separation, and then we assume the 65% recycling calculated in a strict way, how it is now in the new legislation. So not collected, but 65% really recycled in the end. That means here you need, of course, more to come into the recycling plants. So we assume the output, or what goes into recycling plants, is really 65% actually recycled. And then you will still have rejects and residues from recycling. And a part of the rejects, we considered about 80% from the rejects will go to waste to energy or something else, and about 20% will still go to landfill. And to make a long story short, because I understood I should rush up a bit time-wise, otherwise you can ask me afterwards. So from municipal waste, there will be still an amount of 68.5 million tons that need treatment. For commercial waste, we assumed a little bit more ambitious recycling rates, because it's not so heterogeneous like municipal waste. You can recycle a bit more. And then we calculated what is the residual waste, the rejects from recycling and from source separation, and that will be about 73 million tons in Europe. So altogether, we will, when we have implemented the ambitious recycling targets, which are set in the circular economy, we will still have a need for residual waste treatment of about 142 million tons. A part of it is covered by waste to energy and co-incineration. Waste to energy is, well, now it's about 90 million tons, I think. 2016 it was 88.2 million. I would say it's now 19 million tons. Co-incineration, mainly in cement kilns, is about 10.5 million tons. So you have more or less 100 million tons capacity, thermal treatment capacity. That still leaves us with a gap of 40 million tons with the residual waste, and we have to have a honest discussion what to do with it if we want to avoid the pictures I've shown before in Poland, open uncontrolled fires, or export somewhere else in the world, or maybe even criminal routes. So we have to take responsibility how to tackle this gap. And I don't say we should close this gap with waste to energy, but we have to think about it and discuss about it in a honest way. However, we did the calculation. If this gap would be covered by waste to energy, then you could supply about 22 million inhabitants with heat and almost 28 million people with electricity, and you could save about 115 million tons of CO2 equivalents, which is more or less that a member state like Belgium emits per year. We did this exercise for Iceland. So assuming in Iceland you would have achieved the 65% recycling, and you would have maximum 10% landfilling, which is the circular economy goal. Then we took the figures that we got from Iceland. Please correct me if something is wrong, then we are happy to change the calculation. So then you will have you will need a recycling capacity of 143,000 tons. Oops. For municipal waste, and for commercial and industrial waste you will need about 175,000 tons capacity. I understood in Iceland you have already quite high recycling rates for commercial and industrial waste. So, but then you will also have a residual waste of about for treatment 48,000 tons. So you end up with about 100,000 tons of residual waste to deal with, which is not recycled and not landfilled. So that was the exercise for Iceland. Happy to discuss with you and open for your thoughts and corrections about Iceland. And then I conclude how waste to energy can help to have a clean circular economy. So first of all, it helps to reduce landfilling and helps quality recycling by treating the polluted waste, which is not good enough for recycling. Then producing secure energy from this residual waste, and raw materials and primary and secondary raw materials like bottom ash used for construction aggregates, and metal recycling from the bottom ash. And last but not least, I've shown you it keeps the circle clean by acting as a sink for pollutants. I've shown you the filter, how waste to energy can contribute to keep the cycle clean and to avoid that while supporting recycling, quality recycling, but to keep the environment free from polluted articles that will be spread into the environment. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ella. We'd like to thank Ella again for her presentation. Now you have the opportunity to ask her. You can ask in English or you can even ask in Icelandic. Then we will try to translate it to her. And I guess you can ask in German as well if you like. So, who's gonna raise the first question? If no one is going to ask her, I'll remind you that you maybe can have a chat afterwards over a cup of coffee in front. Oh, sorry, Rune. I can ask you a question then. Just a minute, Rune. Yes, of course. Bring you the microphone.
Yes, my name is Rune Derdal from Kvitebjørn Energy in Norway. Now, you were referring to the recycling targets, Ella, and you also were explaining about the calculation methods. Could you explore a little bit more about that, and how you have you seen and how, let me say, the practices have to change around in Europe, because I guess you suggested that the current practices for counting recycling is wrong in almost all countries. You were referring to Germany, for example, that they're recycling at values are too high?
Yeah, well, so far the member states had some flexibility how to calculate the recycling targets. And in Germany, for example, they calculated what they had source separation, and what they collect for recycling, they calculated as recycled. But in reality, the quality was not 100% good enough for recycling, so they had a lot of rejects, and for plastic waste it can be 50%. So you imagine how much the delta is between what you calculate as recycled and what is really recycled. And in the future it will be harmonized, and the member states will have to calculate what is really recycled. And I think it was also a wake-up call when China introduced their ban, because people thought, I have a good conscience because I separate and then the waste goes to recycling. And then they discovered, it was shipped to China, and it was, I don't know if it was really recycled. So it was a little bit of a wake-up call, so that people realize that there are two different things. What you source separate at home is not necessarily 100% recycled. And you saw the other figure, only 12% is really replacing virgin materials, so that's another step. So there's a long way we have to go, because what is the sense of recycling? You have to replace virgin materials. So there's a long way to go.
Eru fleiri spurningar?
You calculated that in Iceland, some like 100,000 tons would have to also be processed in waste-to-energy plants or something similar.
Or somewhere else, but that's the amount that needs treatment.
Other options do we have than waste-to-energy?
If you ask me, I would say, of course, you have to use waste to energy, because that's the amount of waste that cannot be recycled. And so the alternative would be landfilling, but this is not a real alternative anymore. Well, the other alternative would be, of course, you can ship it somewhere, but then you need to find treatment capacity somewhere else. And at the moment, I must say, European waste to energy plants are running full capacity. We receive quite often requests, particularly Italy is at the moment looking for capacities for waste to energy, because they don't have enough waste treatment capacities. But waste to energy plants in Europe are practically running all full capacities. So I don't see an alternative to waste to energy, but maybe I'm biased. But I think the facts justify that.
So Ella, of course, as waste management as that total is to deal with all the waste that's coming on that's been collected. So and then you were referring to the progressive legislation in the EU now to combat. The aim is, of course, to diminish the waste, and also to buy the eco-design, for example, and to ban certain plastics. I understand that's coming on.
Single-use plastics.
Yes, single-use plastic. And but do you see a real game changer coming that will reduce the waste generated? Because that will, of course, change the whole picture in your projections. Do you see any game changer?
Well,
yeah.
I cannot look into the crystal ball, but single-use plastic, and I think it's a good thing to not use single-use plastic, but what will be the substituted material? I still don't know if it will be better. I don't know. That needs to be seen. Maybe it will be even more weight that needs to be treated afterwards. And of course, eco-design is a very important tool, but I don't know how long it will take until it is introduced, and then it takes still a few years until it becomes waste. So I don't know which year this will realize. The efforts need to be done, of course, but I cannot say that now. And what I also observe is that ECHA, you know, in Helsinki, the chemical agency, they classify more and more substances as substances of high concern. And of course, these substances are often even not allowed to be recycled. You have to do something with that. And you have to replace them at a certain time in the future. But until they are replaced, they are implemented in products and they will become waste and they have to be dealt with. And there are more and more substances of concern declared as substances of concern. And also when you substitute them, I don't know, in a few years, in 10 years' time, maybe you find out it's even more substance of matter of concern. That needs to be seen. That's why it's very much looking into the crystal ball. But I don't see, I think it's really it's a long-term view you have to take.
Takk fyrir þetta. Eru nokkrar fleiri spurningar? I think we have finished all the question and answering. So thank you very much, Dr. Ella Stengler, for your introduction. I think we have a lot to learn, and it seems that we need to